In a packed congressional chamber, Jasmine Crockett confronted Jim Jordan, not over money, but over a calculated plot to erase Obama's legacy. As America stood on the edge of a shutdown, one sealed memo with Jordan's signature changed everything. Cheers clashed with outrage as the truth detonated in real time. This wasn't about budgets, it was about betrayal. So what did Jasmine say? That made Jim Jordan flinch? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The chamber was suffocating with tension. Every seat was filled. Staffers, reporters, even rival lawmakers leaned forward, sensing something was about to erupt. Cameras clicked nonstop. The lights above burned hot. Then Jim Jordan leaned into his mic and declared, "Better to shut it all down than waste another dollar on Obamacare." His voice was sharp, smug, theatrical. He smirked, scanned the room like a prizefighter entering the final round, and tugged at his cufflinks like he owned the hearing. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett didn't move. Her eyes locked on Jordan with the focus of a surgeon. One hand rested on a thick, marked-up binder. The other tapped rhythmically beside a sealed envelope labeled confidential. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. But her silence was louder than Jordan's grandstanding. He grinned. She stared. And for one brief second, he looked away first. The cameras caught it. The room felt it. The war had begun. Jasmine rose like a storm tightening its grip. No papers, no theatrics, just her presence, and the room shifted. The tension didn't just build, it snapped taut like a live wire. Jasmine leaned forward, one hand still resting on the thick binder, the other gripping the edge of the table. Her voice came out low but lethal. "Ong voa thua nhan san sang bien chin pu tan kontin. Nhung ong kong hi jen, nhung gia jin song nho tung jong luong kong." She didn't yell. She didn't need to. The weight in her voice was heavier than any gavel. Every syllable struck like a hammer. Her words weren't just aimed at Jim Jordan. They were aimed at every lawmaker hiding behind spreadsheets while families begged for grocery money. Her gaze never broke. Her jaw tightened. Her presence devoured the silence. Jordan scoffed and leaned back, crossing his arms like a teenager caught lying. He gave the same smirk he wore when cameras were off and the deals were done in the hallway. Then, with a tone soaked in sarcasm, he shrugged. "That's the price of fighting waste." It was more than a statement. It was a slap in the face to every American who'd stood in a food bank line while Congress bickered on TV. It was cruel, dismissive, and for a moment it silenced the room in disbelief. Then chaos erupted. Several lawmakers recoiled visibly. Others exploded in protest. The back row began pounding fists on their desks, one after another like war drums. Thud, thud, thud. The sound surged forward. Staffers looked up from their screens. Reporters leaned in. Every eye was locked on the table. The chairman's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order! Order!" But it was too late. The chamber had caught fire. Jasmine stood perfectly still, unshaken. Her eyes never left Jordan. His smirk faltered, barely, but enough for her to see it, enough for the room to sense it. She stepped toward the mic, slow, surgical. She didn't need evidence yet. Her voice was evidence. The room could feel it. The line had been crossed. There would be no retreat, only escalation. The line had been crossed, and Jasmine was ready to strike like thunder. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. With the entire chamber watching, she reached into her binder and pulled out a document thick with weight and consequence. It wasn't just a stack of paper, it was a loaded weapon. She raised it just high enough for every camera to catch the seal. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Cool, sharp, and deliberate, she spoke. Shutdown 2013 cost the United States $24 billion. The words didn't echo. They detonated. For a full 2 seconds, the room froze. One reporter gasped audibly. A staffer dropped their pen. The tension didn't hang. It seized every throat in the room. Jasmine didn't turn toward the chairman or the gallery. She stared straight at Jim Jordan, her eyes blazing, her grip steady. Then the screens behind her exploded to life. 3 massive monitors blazed red, blood red. Charts surged skyward like missiles. Graphs, spikes, financial hemorrhaging, all screaming catastrophe. And in the center of it all, one glowing figure burned into the room. $24 billion. dollars. The number hovered over the hearing like a guillotine. It wasn't theoretical. It was damnation in digits. Lawmakers stirred. Some sank into their seats. Others leaned forward, breath caught in their chests. Jasmine stepped aside, never breaking her gaze. "Is that fiscal responsibility?" she asked, her voice razor sharp. "Or is that setting taxpayer money on fire?" It wasn't a question. It was a charge. It landed like a slap. Every syllable drew blood. Her tone wasn't angry. It was surgical. She wanted them to feel it, not debate it. And they did. The entire room felt the blade slide in. Then Jordan snapped. Bang! His palms smashed against the wood table, hard enough to rattle his glass and knock a folder sideways. The outburst sent a ripple through the room, but the gavel didn't come. No one moved. They were waiting for him to drown. "That's Democrat propaganda," he roared, voice cracking with fury. His jaw was tight, his cheeks flushed. He wasn't shouting to defend himself. He was shouting because he had nothing else left. Jasmine didn't move an inch. Behind her, the monitors still burned red. The number still hovered. The silence in her body screamed louder than his voice ever could. The facts were now permanent. The stage was scorched, and Jim Jordan had just walked straight into the fire. The room was scorched with silence, and Jasmine wasn't finished. She turned her head slowly, like a sniper locking onto her next target. "I'd like to call Mr. Raymond Keller to speak," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It sliced through the air with calm precision. From the back of the chamber, a man rose. Mid-50s, gray at the temples. His suit was pressed but dated. His eyes looked like they hadn't known sleep in weeks. Each step he took toward the witness mic echoed like a war drum in the stillness. Raymond Keller didn't speak right away. He placed both hands on the podium, knuckles white, breath uneven. Then finally he lifted his chin. "My name is Raymond Keller. I've worked for the federal government for 22 years. Not once have I taken a sick day. I showed up when it snowed, when my back ached, when my son was in the hospital. I believed if I gave the government everything, I'd be protected when it mattered." His voice cracked, but he forced himself to keep going. "During the shutdown, my paycheck vanished. I called HR. They told me to hold tight, but my landlord didn't offer the same grace. He gave me 7 days." Keller paused, lips trembling. "Day 6, I stuffed my son's clothes into trash bags. He thought we were going on vacation. I didn't have the heart to tell him we were being thrown out of our home." The room held its breath. Not a cough, not a shift, just the sound of truth swallowing the air. "My son, he's 11, Keller continued, barely above a whisper. "He had to leave his school in the middle of the semester. New district, no friends, no sense of why. He asked me what he did wrong." His voice broke. "And I didn't have an answer." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, rattling orange prescription bottle. Empty. "My mother is 74. She's a diabetic. During the shutdown, she ran out of insulin. I tried every clinic. No insurance, no paycheck, no help." His eyes welled. "I had to buy insulin from a friend of a friend. Black market. I knew it was dangerous. I didn't care. Because watching her blood sugar climb and not being able to fix it, that was hell." His next words shook. "She collapsed. I spent 3 nights in an emergency room begging them to keep her on the monitor. That is what your shutdown gave us." Gas erupted. One congresswoman covered her mouth. A reporter stood without realizing it. Jasmine didn't move. Her silence let every syllable sink into Jordan like a blade. Then from across the table, Jim Jordan leaned in. Face red, jaw clenched, voice sharp like broken glass. "Unfortunate, but necessary." The words crashed into the chamber like a thunderclap. Audible groans. Aides shaking their heads. The oxygen in the room evaporated. Keller didn't respond. He simply looked at Jordan. Long, quiet, hollow, and walked back to his seat like a man carrying the weight of every betrayed promise in America. And in that moment, the silence screamed louder than any headline. The silence hadn't faded, but Jasmine wasn't done bleeding the truth into the room. She turned slowly, eyes locked on the massive screen behind her. "Let's be very clear," she said, voice like ice before a storm. With a swift signal to her aide, the lights dimmed slightly. The display shifted. A bold, blinding headline exploded across the screen in bone-white letters. 800,000 federal workers unpaid. The font was so massive, it looked like it had been carved into the wall itself. The number didn't move. It didn't blink. It hovered like a death toll. And then came the images, raw, unforgiving, real. A TSA officer asleep on an airport bench, badge still on, arms folded tightly against the cold. A public health doctor outside a locked clinic holding a handwritten sign, "Closed due to shutdown." A border patrol agent in uniform sitting on a porch step, head in hands, wedding ring catching the light while his kids watch from inside. Jasmine didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The screen was screaming loud enough. Every image pierced the room like shrapnel. Some lawmakers looked away, others stared, paralyzed. The silence wasn't just heavy, it was ashamed. Then Jasmine stepped forward, her voice erupting like fire catching dry timber. "You call this a victory?" she shouted, eyes burning, hand raised toward the wall of devastation behind her. "Hundreds of thousands of families have been torn apart by your gamble." Her voice cracked through the marble and leather like thunder through glass. "This isn't leadership, it's collateral damage. You didn't shut down a system, you shattered lives." Gasps broke from the back rows. One reporter let out a low, "Jesus," under his breath. The images behind Jasmine kept shifting. Airport delays, families at food banks, children holding signs reading, "My mom works for free." No edits, no filters, just raw consequences. Jim Jordan flinched visibly. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again, like a man trying to remember a lifeline in a room with no air. Finally, he blurted out, "Wasteful spending." No one answered. He tried again. "Wasteful spending." Louder now, but hollow, frantic. His voice cracked on spending, like it couldn't hold its own weight. Again, "Wasteful spending." But the phrase rang like a broken record skipping over the wreckage. Jasmine didn't move. The number still glared behind her. 800,000. Silent, immovable, merciless. And Jim Jordan, once smug, once sure, now looked like a man drowning in the very shutdown he helped create. His words had become noise, his defense meaningless. The room didn't just witness his collapse, it absorbed it, and it would never forget. The room had seen the numbers, it had heard the stories. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She wasn't just going to corner Jim Jordan, she was going to rip the mask off in front of the entire country. Without warning, she stepped out from behind her microphone. Her heels struck the marble like gunfire. Measured, sharp, unavoidable. The crowd froze. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for protocol. She walked directly down the center aisle between the rows of lawmakers, her gaze locked like a laser on one target. Jim Jordan. He saw her coming. He shifted in his chair, stiffening. She didn't slow. She didn't blink. She stopped right at his table, leaned in just enough, and delivered the blow. "Do you have the guts to look a woman in the eye after she's lost her home and tell her that her suffering was necessary?" The room cracked open. Her words dropped like a hammer on glass. Not a whisper, not a shuffle. Her voice didn't shake. It sliced, cold, controlled, devastating. It wasn't a question. It was a reckoning. Jordan's face froze. His eyes darted toward the chairman, toward the cameras, then back to Jasmine. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came. His fingers twitched. 4 seconds. 5. The silence was surgical. Then, bang! He slammed his palm on the table, shaking his glass, and shouted, "This is politics!" The sentence didn't sound like a defense. It sounded like an escape route, one he already knew had collapsed behind him. Gasps exploded around the room. Several lawmakers recoiled. A reporter in the press box dropped his pen. The moment felt unreal, like the air itself had been punched. Then came the banging. Thud, 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 fists pounding desks. Not in applause, but in outrage. Chaos rolled forward like a wave. "Answer the damn question," one voice yelled from the back. "Don't you dare dodge it," another snapped. Say it to her face, Jordan. Jordan's lips moved, but his voice was caught. His face had flushed to crimson. He looked down at his notes, then up at Jasmine, then back at nothing. One hand clutched the edge of the table. The other trembled just above his mic. He reached for it again, but stopped, opened his mouth, closed it. The words were gone. He rocked forward, then back, like a man caught in the slow realization that there was nowhere left to hide. His tie was crooked, his collar damp. He glanced toward his aide. No lifeline. Toward the chairman, no help. Jasmine never moved. She stood tall. Her eyes never wavered. She didn't need to say anything else. The damage was already done. Jordan had been asked one question. He answered with silence, and the whole damn room watched him fall apart. Jordan's silence had shattered his armor, but his ego refused to die quietly. He lunged forward like a man grabbing at the last piece of a sinking ship. The Democrats are the real hostage takers, he barked, his voice loud, frantic, almost hysterical. His fist struck the table again, but this time the sound was hollow, more panic than power. You created this crisis. You pushed reckless spending. You forced this shutdown. His fingers stabbed the air, flailing without direction, blaming shadows because the truth was now staring him in the face. It wasn't an argument. It was a meltdown wrapped in denial. Across the room, Jasmine didn't even blink. She tilted her head slightly, almost amused. Her smile curled, not warm, not sympathetic, but sharp, surgical. She let the silence stretch just enough to make Jordan sweat under the lights, then walked forward with the calm of someone who knew the endgame was hers. And then she delivered it, soft but venom-laced. No, she said, her voice low and deliberate, each word carved like stone. You're the gambler, and what you put on the table wasn't your money, it was their lives. The effect was instant and explosive. The room erupted in chaos. Gasps collided with shouts. Some lawmakers slammed their hands on desks. One aide covered her mouth. A senator on the far end muttered, "Oh my God." Reporters in the gallery surged forward, cameras whirring, phones lifted. One congresswoman shouted, "Out of line," while another roared, "Let her finish." The walls of the hearing chamber seemed to shake under the force of it all, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't even glance at the noise. She stood perfectly still, eyes locked on Jordan like a predator savoring the exact moment its prey realizes there's no way out. And Jordan? He looked like a man unraveling in real time. His face flushed deeper, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. He tried to speak, once, twice, but the words caught in his throat. The same mouth that had barked orders and deflected blame now struggled to form a coherent sentence. His hand, still gripping the edge of the table, had gone pale at the knuckles. He scanned the room for support, but his allies wouldn't meet his eyes. The chairman stared down at the desk, lips pressed tight. His staffer typed something nervously, pretending not to hear the crowd closing in. Jasmine's words still echoed in the air, louder than the chaos around them. You're the gambler, and what you put on the table wasn't your money, it was their lives. It wasn't just a line, it was a conviction. It was every paycheck missed, every house lost, every child pulled from class, and every pill left unfilled. It was the moment the crowd didn't just see a politician fall, they saw someone held accountable. The room didn't calm, it vibrated, like the air was charged, like everyone was waiting, because what Jasmine had just said wasn't the final blow. It was the silence before the execution. The chaos hadn't settled, but Jasmine was about to drop the match that would burn what little was left standing. She moved with deadly precision. No words, no theatrics. Just the quiet intensity of someone who knew the final blow was in her hands. From her binder, she pulled a sealed envelope, cream-colored, thick, and stamped in bold red. Confidential, internal, GOP memo. The room seemed to stop breathing. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The hum of the gallery went still. Even the gavel froze in midair. Jasmine held it up, slowly, deliberately, like a judge unsealing a final verdict. Then with a flick of her fingers, she broke the seal. The soft rip of the envelope echoed like thunder in the silence. She unfolded the document and gave a nod to the technician in the back. The screen behind her changed instantly. There, projected in full clarity for the world to see, was a typed memo with a single sentence at the top. Bold, underlined, impossible to misinterpret. Shutdown isn't about money, it's about stopping Obama. And just beneath it, handwritten in black ink, unmistakable, is Jim Jordan. For half a second, the room didn't move. Then it detonated. Lawmakers stood up shouting. One slammed his notebook on the table. Another pointed toward the screen, yelling, "Did you really write that?" Reporters swarmed toward the edge of the gallery, cameras flashing, mics recording, chaos erupting in waves. Staffers whispered frantically to each other. The chairman's gavel pounded. Once, twice, 3 times, but no one was listening anymore. Jasmine stepped back slowly, arms folded, her eyes locked on Jordan. He didn't move. Not at first. Then, like a man waking up in a nightmare, he jolted forward, reaching for his mic with trembling hands. "That's fake," he shouted, voice cracking under the weight of panic. "That's fake. Fabricated." He looked left, then right, as if someone, anyone, might come to his defense. But no one moved. No one spoke. The screen was still lit, still showing his signature, like a scar across the truth. "That's not real," he shouted again, but this time weaker, flatter, like he didn't believe it himself. "I didn't write that. This is a setup." The desperation spilled into every word. His face was pale now, his eyes wide. His voice no longer filled the room. It bounced off the walls like static. The man who had walked into the chamber full of fire and venom now looked like he was drowning in his own lies. Across the aisle, a Democrat shouted, "Explain your own words, Congressman." A Republican near the back stood, but said nothing. His eyes narrowed, jaw locked. Even the chairman hesitated, gripping his gavel tighter, as if trying to decide whether to end the hearing or let it implode on its own. And through it all, Jasmine didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her silence screamed louder than any accusation. The memo was still on screen. The signature still glowed. The damage was irreversible. The motive exposed. The facade shattered. Jim Jordan hadn't just lost the room. He just confessed, in his own handwriting. And Jasmine, she didn't even flinch. With one slow breath, Jasmine raised the memo high above her shoulder. No speech, no lecture, just paper and power. The room tensed like a wire pulled taut. Cameras zoomed in on the bottom right corner of the document, where a bold, unmistakable signature sat beneath 12 damning words. "Shutdown isn't about money, it's about stopping Obama. Jim Jordan." The name glared back at the nation, now frozen on every TV screen. The House chamber fell deathly still. 20 seconds. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the ceiling lights seemed to dim under the weight of that silence. The gavel lay untouched. Chairs creaked, but no one dared to speak. It was as if the entire institution of Congress had been cracked open by that single image. And now it was bleeding truth. Jasmine stood unmoving, one arm raised, eyes locked on Jordan like she was holding a mirror to his soul. Across the aisle, a few Republican congressmen turned their heads away. Some rubbed their temples, some muttered curses under their breath. Others simply stared down at their desks in silent dread. One removed his glasses and exhaled sharply. Another whispered, "God damn it, Jim," as if it were both a prayer and a confession. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was fear. Fear of what this moment meant for everything they'd denied, defended, and deflected. Jordan didn't look up. His hands shook, fingers twitching like they wanted to tear the paper from her hand, but couldn't find the courage. His gaze stayed glued to the table, jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. His skin had gone pale, like the blood had abandoned him. The man who just minutes ago was yelling about fabrication and fakes was now stone silent, completely exposed, completely undone. A camera zoomed in tighter. The signature trembled slightly in Jasmine's hand, but not from her. It was the air in the room, charged, alive, ready to explode. But Jasmine remained still, like a monument to restraint, to righteous fury contained behind poise. She didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't lower the document. She let the truth sit in the center of the room like a grenade no one wanted to touch. Then the sound of a pen rolling off a desk echoed like a gunshot. Everyone flinched. Jasmine still didn't move. On the back row, a senior Republican leaned into his aide and whispered, "Get him out of here before he pukes." But Jordan didn't need anyone to escort him. He was already sinking into himself. His elbows rested on the table, his head low, hands clasped, not in prayer, but in surrender. His lips moved, mouthing something, but no sound came out. Maybe it was denial, maybe it was shame, or maybe it was the exact moment a man realized history had finally caught up with him. Another Republican, one of Jordan's closest allies, stood and quietly exited the chamber, not saying a word. A ripple of movement followed as a few others did the same, shame written all over their faces. Not one of them looked at Jasmine. Not one of them could. She slowly lowered the memo, folding it neatly as if it were nothing more than a receipt. Then she placed it back in the sealed envelope with chilling precision, like a surgeon finishing the cut. Still, she said nothing. The silence had already said it all. In the back of the room, someone whispered, "Is it real?" A staffer answered, "It's his handwriting." Dated 4 days before the shutdown. Another voice muttered, "He signed it." He damn well signed it. The tremor moved like a wave, from seat to seat, a rising hum of disbelief and dread that no one could stop. Jordan tried to speak. Lips parted, breath stuttered, but no words formed. His tongue caught in his throat, his chest heaved. For the first time in his career, he had no script, no spin, no scapegoat. Just the truth, and the entire weight of it staring back at him. And Jasmine? She finally looked down, not at Jordan, but at the floor in front of him, as if to say, "This is where your integrity died." The cameras caught it all. A single tear rolled down Jordan's cheek, unnoticed by most but not by Jasmine. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just stood, steady and unshaken, as the man who once shouted her down was now barely able to lift his head. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't suspenseful. It was final. The silence was still hanging in the air when Jasmine finally stepped forward and delivered the words no one could unhear. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone cut through the room like a sharpened blade wrapped in velvet. She turned to the full committee, locking eyes with no one and everyone at once. Her voice was steady, grounded in something far deeper than outrage. Truth. "This," she said, holding up the memo one last time, "is not a budget. This is a political game." The room didn't breathe. "And you, Jim Jordan, have turned millions of American citizens into hostages." The moment the sentence ended, the hearing room erupted, split straight down the middle. Applause burst from one side like a dam finally breaking, raw and furious and cathartic. On the other side, boos, shouts, and frantic banging of fists on tables drowned out any attempt at order. One senator yelled, "Point of order," while another screamed, "Sit down, Jasmine." But she didn't move. She stood like a monument carved in fire and marble. The cameras kept rolling, and no one could look away. The war of sound clashed like a courtroom riot. It wasn't a hearing anymore. It was history combusting. Chairman Graves slammed the gavel with force. Once, twice. "Order!" he barked. But no one heard. His voice was a paper match in a hurricane. Jasmine didn't flinch. She stayed rooted in place, memo in hand, as the chaos unfolded around her like a collapsing building. Another Democrat leaned forward to whisper something into her ear. She shook her head. She had said what needed to be said. Finally, Graves leaned into the microphone, voice lowered but firm. "Effective immediately, this committee is opening a formal ethics investigation into the conduct and decision-making of Congressman Jim Jordan." His words hit the room like a cold steel door slamming shut. It was done. The decision had weight, and it left no escape hatch. The Republicans in the back shifted uncomfortably. Some stared at the ground. Others whispered to aides who were already texting faster than they could breathe. Cameras zoomed in on faces suddenly pale, like they'd seen the tide turn and knew they were standing in its path. Someone near the back corner mumbled, "It's over." It wasn't clear if they meant the meeting, the scandal, or Jim Jordan's career. And then the press broke it. Within minutes, headlines exploded across every news outlet like flares in a night sky. Jordan betrayal memo, ethics investigation launched. Whistleblower confirms timeline. Crockett's 14 seconds that shook the hill. From CNN to Fox, from Reddit to Bloomberg, the memo had a name now. And that name was political poison. Jordan betrayal memo trended globally within the hour. But it wasn't just the media. Outside the chamber, crowds had already started to gather. Phones rang in every office. Protesters appeared near the Capitol steps holding signs that read, "We are not hostages, and play games with your career, not our lives." Hashtags multiplied like fire in dry grass. Journalists screamed into cameras while producers yelled for timestamps and exclusive angles. The wind had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Inside, the weight fell squarely on Jim Jordan. He didn't say a word. He hadn't spoken since Jasmine had raised the memo. His face had gone slack, no longer the confident smirk of a seasoned political tactician, but the dazed stare of a man realizing the oxygen in the room was no longer his to command. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands, once constantly moving, gesturing, scribbling notes, fixing his tie, now hung limp. He looked around as if searching for a way out that didn't exist. His colleagues didn't meet his eyes. Even those who once echoed his every word seemed to turn inward, avoiding the glare of association. One staffer tried to hand him his phone. He didn't take it. Another whispered something in his ear. He nodded, but it was empty, automatic. A nod from a man who knew there was no script left to follow. And then, without a single word, he stood. The room, already tense, somehow tightened further. Every camera lens snapped into focus. Jasmine didn't move. She watched him, not with hate, not even with triumph, but with an unspoken sentence she didn't need to say. "You did this to yourself." Jim Jordan turned. His steps were slow, deliberate, each footfall a resignation. The man who had once stormed through hearings like a wrecking ball now walked as if each step weighed 40 pounds. He didn't look back. He didn't speak. He didn't shake hands. The doors at the end of the chamber opened, and Jim Jordan walked through them, alone. The silence that followed was eerie. All that remained was his chair, empty, tilted slightly forward as if still waiting for him to return. But he wouldn't, not today, maybe not ever. Outside the Capitol, the world was changing. Allies were giving statements that sounded more like farewells than support. One prominent Republican said, "We take these allegations seriously and await the Ethics Committee's findings." Another called the memo deeply troubling and refused to answer follow-up questions. Even those who didn't speak were already making calls to distance themselves, erasing quotes, rewording endorsements, and locking down social media accounts. And Jasmine, she didn't celebrate. She stayed seated as the chamber emptied, her eyes fixed on the folded memo, now resting silently on the table in front of her. The same table where so many lies had passed as policy. The same room where power had masked itself as budget talk. And yet in one afternoon, the entire narrative had flipped, because one woman had refused to look away. She didn't win by yelling. She didn't win by fighting fire with fire. She won by showing the truth and letting it burn everything false to the ground. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.